It's a pleasure to be here. Welcome everyone again. My name is Pamela McKelvin, and as Matt mentioned, I am the Director for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Columbia Business School. It's my pleasure to welcome you here to the Neurodiversity and Untapped Competitive Advantage session. So if you didn't know, that is where you are at, and we are happy to have you. And I'm also pleased to introduce you to Rajesh Anandan. As Matt mentioned, he is the co-founder and CEO of Ultranauts. And we have about 30 minutes together to learn just about how we can reimagine the way an organization can hire and manage talent, including some universal workplace practices that employers can adopt to be a more inclusive organization.
It's great to be here. I'm going to share my screen and do a little bit of a presentation, and then we'll have more of a conversation with Pamela. All right, so Ultranauts has been around for 8 years. My co-founder Art Scheckman and I started the company with a simple mission to demonstrate that neurodiversity could be a competitive advantage for business. And our theory of change was simply to build a world-class, commercially viable business that could deliver better value for our clients, and along the way reimagine how a company hires talent, manages teams, develops careers, and operates so that a much wider profile of talent and a much wider group of humans could work together and collaborate and thrive, and take everything we're learning and share it with other employers, so that the journey towards neurodiversity and embracing diversity in all its forms could be a little bit easier for those who come after us. So I'm always happy to share what we've been up to and what we're learning. So today we are a team that's spread out over 29 states across the US. We're all onshore. And 3/4 of our team across the company are on the autism spectrum. And we have autistic colleagues, not just our quality engineers and quality analysts, which is most people at Ultranauts because we're a quality engineering firm, but also on our HR and recruiting team or on the leadership team. And this is by design, because we fundamentally believe that by bringing together different brain types, different information processing models, different problem solving styles, and forging collaborative teams, we could do better. We could solve more complex problems. We could surface more unique insights and just drive improvement in a more continuous way. And in our case, all through the lens of quality of software, data, and business processes. And while we are, of course, neurodiverse, we also are diverse along many other dimensions. 40% of our team are cisgender female, 5% of our team are non-binary, 5% are trans, 12% have other gender identities. And so we may be the most gender diverse engineering firm out there. 28% of our team are people of color. And then not just in terms of demographics, but we also think about diversity in terms of socioeconomics. 3/4 of our team were unemployed or underemployed when they joined the firm. 40% of our team used to live below the poverty income line before they joined the firm. And so as we think about diversity, we of course have a mission that's anchored in neurodiversity. But we know that in order to achieve neurodiversity, there are no point solutions, and we have to create a truly inclusive workplace. And in order to do that, we've had to reimagine every aspect of the business, and we are on this journey to creating what we call a universal workplace, which simply means applying universal design principles to the system that is work. And that means building flexibility in as the norm versus a accommodation or an exception. So everybody works from home. We've been that way for 8 years. That doesn't work for everyone, but certainly for most Ultranauts, many may not have even applied if they thought they would be forced to commute into a same space and work in a typical office environment. But we think of flexibility in many other dimensions, and we'll talk a bit more about that. We have moved away from the notion of an FTE, a full-time equivalent, as the only unit of work that people need to fit into. We think of it more in terms of a DTE, a desired time equivalent. Like, what is optimally productive for you? Is it, quote, full time, or is it 3/4 time? Because if you're hyper productive for part of the week, there's no reason you can't have a salary and progress in your career. Um, Transparency, in particularly around decision making, is absolutely critical as you bring together people from very different experiences and backgrounds and interests. Um, and of course, focusing on well-being. We have a bot that measures, polls our team at 5 p.m. local time every day. Each day is a single poll. We cycle through about a dozen polls, which tie back to dimensions of inclusion and well-being that we as a group have decided are important to us. Um, One of them is loneliness, and we've been measuring loneliness as a team for many years now. We're about to start measuring psychological safety through an independent nonprofit group that's going to audit our team, our company, on psychological safety, and those results would be published internally, publicly. And that creates extreme accountability, because it's not just an HR team's problem or the leadership team's problem. If there are problems, we all need to first own up to where we need to be better, and then actually take actions to move us towards a place where everyone is feeling included and productive and creating value and being valued. And maybe most importantly, for us, inclusion is more than a feeling or a concept. We're a bunch of engineers, so we've designed inclusion into our core business practices in terms of how we think about recruiting in a more objective way, or how we run our projects, which are all Agile and Scrum, in a more inclusive way, or how we think about training and upskilling and designing instruction material and technical training in a more inclusive way. And as a result of all of that, even though we are fully distributed, everyone works from home in 29 states, most of us have never met each other, and we're incredibly diverse. You know, on any of our teams, we'll have a wide range of learning styles and information processing models and communication preferences and stress triggers. We might have colleagues who have PTSD or severe anxiety. With all of that, because we measure loneliness, we know this, our team is a whole lot less lonely than the typical American worker. And before COVID, 40% of Americans reported feeling lonely at work, and arguably that's a lot worse now. And so we've been able to create a connected, engaged team in a very different and maybe more extreme circumstance. But it's because we have to design for sort of an extreme user of the system that is work, that we've made a workplace that's better for everyone. And because of that, we've shown over and over again that we can deliver better value for our clients in our core work, which is software quality engineering, data quality engineering. We'll partner with a client's internal software development team or engineering team and build automated testing to make sure the software they're building works the way it's supposed to. Or we'll partner with an internal data science team or data analytics team to do an enterprise-wide data quality audit to figure out what's good data you can trust, or validate the output of your machine learning models so you can make good decisions. And it's fairly technical and complex work. We're of course competing with lots of large consultancies, but over and over again, we've demonstrated that we could deliver dramatically better results to a wide range of Fortune 5 firms, the likes of AIG or Berkshire Hathaway, Bloomberg, BNY Mellon, Colgate, Cigna, and so on. And we of course work with pure tech companies like Slack as well. And outside of our core business, we've also been able to innovate both of our own practices that we're now starting to share with the world, and as well as open up adjacencies that aren't in our core quality engineering business. And I'll share a couple examples of that. A few years ago, a teammate at Ultranauts said, I can never figure out how to work with some of the teammates on this project. I just wish humans came with a user manual. And of course, that's a simple and powerful idea. And from that simple thought emerged what we now call the Biodex. We've built it into a Slackbot. And it's a self-authored quick start guide for how to work with me It's very pragmatic. It's not theoretical like a Myers-Briggs kind of framework. And it's 20 fields, including some that are absolutely critical to know when you're working on a distributed and diverse team, like what are your feedback preferences? Because while most managers are taught to, for example, give critical feedback in the moment, in a live conversation, sandwiched by positive and affirming comments, turns out that actually doesn't work for many humans. It's there's no silver bullet. And so at Ultranauts, all I need to do is look up someone's feedback preferences. It's a single command in Slack. And I know whether, for example, if I have some constructive feedback to give, do they want it in the moment, or, and these are drop-down menus, so it's fairly standardized, or at the end of the day or end of the week. I know how they'd like to receive it. Is it on a call, or would they prefer it in writing? And then have a conversation if something's not clear or they don't agree. And framing, because we all get defensive. We're human. We don't like being criticized. Is there a way I could phrase or frame this conversation to simply make it easier to hear? And if you're thinking at this point, gosh, my team could use that. Yes, this is not about, what neurodivergent team members need. This is what all team members need. And it just so happens that if you have colleagues who might be triggered, having a simple tool like this can prevent those extreme events from happening. We've also sort of worked the way we run our work. And again, because we're an engineering team, everything we do is using Agile and Scrum. And we've authored what we call inclusive Agile. We just published in a peer-reviewed journal a few months ago, and we're sharing this more broadly because we think Agile is fantastic, and so is Scrum. And it can be adapted so that it's fantastic for everyone, and not just some sort of theoretical mean of person that doesn't exist. And then outside of our core business, we've just launched a practice that takes all of our capabilities around data quality engineering, structuring data, analyzing data, surfacing patterns of anomalies in data, and so on, and applying all of that to the data exhaust that's generated around the employee experience to spot patterns of bias. We call it talent bias detection, and this has been so well received that our teams are actually booked through the end of the year. It's highly specialized work. And so if you need talent bias detection, we'll see you in Q1 2022. But essentially, we're able to go in and go beyond theory and hypotheses and good intentions to say, okay, let's actually audit your performance review process, all of your performance review data with statistical analyses and NLP, and actually precisely pinpoint where there are patterns of bias. And all of that allows us as a business, because we are a business, we're a for-profit enterprise, to continue to grow and evolve. And we've been growing our top line at over 50% a year. And last year, while Q2 was rough for us, as it was for many organizations, we took a real hit to the business. We recovered by Q3 and ended the year having grown 70%, because we have fundamentally created an organization and an environment where we have incredibly capable humans who are able to use their unique strengths and not leave any human potential on the table, which then allows us to do better than most others out there. And that's it.
Thank you so much, Rajesh. This was amazing. We have so many questions that have come into the chat. I think that what I will do is maybe just start off with a couple of questions of my own, and then we'll open up to some of the wonderful questions that are in the Q&A. First, I want to say that I just love that you really highlight that the work that you do, actually, there's a return on your investment. You invest in people and doing really ethical business practices. And as a result of that you've seen an increase and you've seen a consistent growth. And that's a powerful statement. And to show the importance of what you do, it's also very beneficial to the work and to your organization's success, right? So some of the questions in the chat kind of allude to this, and it's about just, diversity and not just getting people through the pipeline, but just kind of really changing the pipeline itself and how we look at it. And so to me, being one of the more diverse companies out there, both in gender, you talk about closing the poverty gap, and obviously, of course, employing neurodiverse employees, and also being diverse in how you actually imagine the workplace with flexible workplace norms and really integrating just all of this stuff into your core business practices. What do you think about some other organizations that are using data analytics and applying neurodiversity to develop job placement technologies for helping businesses clarify job roles and hire diverse talent?
So I think there's a need to be more evidence-based and objective, and a willingness to move beyond what's comfortable, right? So if we think of sort of the typical recruiting toolkit, you look at a resume, do an interview or 2 or 5, and then you make a hire. And the success rates of this approach are not that great. There's been a ton of work done looking at the efficacy of those common recruiting tools. There've been more than one meta-analysis published that looked at the correlation between like years of work experience and on-the-job performance, or interview assessment and on-the-job performance. And it turns out, for example, that the correlation between years of work experience and on-the-job performance is like an R squared of 0.03, or something absurd. Like, and an R squared is simply the measure of correlation. 0 means no correlation. 1 is a perfect correlation. There's no correlation. And so when we try to pattern match the past, we leave out some really important considerations. One is, what if someone who's incredibly capable hasn't had a fair shot to access opportunity? That means they'll never access opportunity because they don't have the experience they need, And so I would say the more we can use evidence to inform our practices and be willing to move past what's familiar. For example, we all like doing interviews. We think, we overestimate our ability to spot talent. And it turns out, at least most studies would look at interview assessments. If you take unstructured interviews, which are terrible, and I can't believe these still happen, R squared of maybe 0.1. Structured interview where you have the same set of questions and a scoring rubric that determines what good answers are before the conversation, bounds the very natural human bias that kicks in. We just have to assume that bias training doesn't get rid of bias, and you need the environment that you're operating within to have nudges and tools that constrain that bias. And so all this to say, step 1 is, of course, structured interviews are helpful, but have more objective ways to actually assess talent. For example, job tests. And these are not just for entry-level roles or technical roles. At Ultranauts, we use job tests for recruiting, period. It's not a accommodation. It's not a special program for female applicants or autistic applicants, because job tests are more objective. And so every job at Ultranauts has a job test, including entry-level quality analysts. We hired our head of sales to join the leadership team to take a job test. Because it's a better way to work. All applicants, not just marginalized applicants, just all applicants, because it's a better way to recruit. The second I would say is sourcing matters. So while our recruiting kind of talent screening process is the same for everyone, if you get a job at Ultranauts, it's because you have the right brain for the right job. We don't care who you are. We embrace who you are, but that doesn't make you, have a higher or lower likelihood of getting the job. But where we do invest differentially is how we attract, reach, and meet applicants, potential applicants, where they are. We go beyond universities. So we did a recent informal look at, like, if we look at our top performers, what are sort of the common traits? We're engineers, we're looking for patterns. And it turns out, almost a third of that group don't have a college degree, right? So it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean you are going to be better at this job. And so we don't limit ourselves to degrees or certifications. We value those, but those are not requirements. We don't limit ourselves to people who might be on LinkedIn or ZipRecruiter. We use those platforms, but we don't limit ourselves to it, because there are lots of talent who may not feel comfortable, or may not have the confidence, or may not even know how to navigate those systems. We don't limit ourselves to job placement groups or other kind of focused platforms, because there may be people, for example, who are neurodivergent, do not have a formal diagnosis, or are uncomfortable seeking out help. And so, but could be a fantastic quality engineer, and we don't want to miss out on that talent. And so we think of sourcing more like grassroots outreach and content marketing in order to meet great talent where they are. And we have to try harder to cast as wide a net as possible, so that we don't end up with, unintentionally a narrower group than humans, because we want humans. I would say, when it comes to analytics, again, there's of course a role for data and objective decisions to improve the process. And our entire talent bias kind of initiative is about that. With the caution that in order to train a model, you need history. And if the history is biased and narrow, then you have to try extra hard to make sure that's not repeated in the future you're creating.
Excellent. So pretty much what I'm hearing is that data is important, and you also use it in your practices, but there is a caution about it, right? That you have to be mindful.
And it's, I think we kind of do quality checks and build automation to validate the output of analytics engines and machine learning models. So we're in this domain, like we sort of have a decent understanding of where these systems and tools can be useful versus not. And really the big watch out is to make sure that we are not calcifying the past into systems that are making predictions or driving human decisions.
Right. Which is why, obviously you mentioned just the importance of pairing it with grassroots outreach, right? And going beyond just what we may find on some of our, LinkedIn or some of those platforms that, we typically just kind of like benchmark to, or just that's our default, right? But that we actually expand it and be a lot more intentional. I'm just highlighting that because we do have some questions that were asked about how do you find employees and clients and them re-entering the workplace. And I think that you've already, touched on that in a number of areas. So I think maybe I'll just see if there was another question that came in about, the ways that you use data. So how companies are looking at data and the potential environmental impact of their future AI projects. Karan is asking, how are companies doing that? How are they looking at their data and its impact on future AI projects? And is that a best practice being promoted when evaluating AI?
That's a kind of big question, and I'm certainly not, this is where I would turn over to my colleague, Nicole Radsville, who's our principal data scientist and head of quality, who's just, really a thought leader in this space around quality of systems. But the thing I would say is there's a lot of noise around digital transformation. And initially it was around creating digital experiences for consumers. And it's moved fairly quickly to having better decision-making and predictions built on top of AI. And so the sort of very boring challenge that a lot of data science teams are facing is that you're trying to build sophisticated models on top of garbage, because you've got just not great data sets, and in some cases just massive amounts of third-party data streaming in, or mountains of dark data inside this enterprise siloed everywhere that you don't actually know what you can trust versus not. So that's just at a very basic level, and part of the reason we exist and are growing. I think we need to sort of clean up those basic issues as we're tackling the more interesting ones, like bias training data sets. And there's research happening now. Some of it is getting to industry in terms of building interpretable machine learning models or explainable AI, so that a human can interact and understand how certain decisions were made. And that's a key component of then being able to say, well, is this thing working the way it's supposed to or not? But I think we're still a few years away from sort of interpretability being designed into the systems that are being deployed commercially.